What's up, guys? Welcome back to Callahan Media. My name is Lex, and today we're going to be speculating and talking about the history of the Green Lantern character. So obviously James Gunn in his new DCU, he's going to be completely rebooting the character of Green Lantern, and the Green Lantern Corps as a whole is full of so many fucking different heralds of that hierarchy. We got John Stewart, Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, there's Kilowog. You know, there's Sinestro. You know, there's so many different Green Lanterns. There's a bunch of as well in the new DC, new 52. Excuse me. So in this video, we're gonna be kind of talking about a bunch of things. We're gonna be talking about the state of it and the expectations. So let's go on to our next video image. Okay, so the last iteration that we almost got was Wayne D. Carr in the Snyder Cut. Now, Zack Snyder's premise was initially to include him in the post-credit scene in the place of Martian Manhunter. And I think that this could have been huge. It would have been the first cinematic, example of John Stewart in film. You know, and there's nothing we can say about Wayne D. Carr. That footage hasn't been released, although I wish it had been. You know, and I think that, you know, this standard alone could have been huge, especially for the Black community, as far as having a reputable character in the DCU. You know, there's a couple scribbled across, you know, the iterations of the DC cinematic films across the history of time, but Wayne D. Carr could have been a really cool thing. So with that being said, I've heard that this new Lantern show that's going to be on HBO Max, HBO Max, whatever the fuck it's going to be called today. It's supposed to be kind of a broken down and like choreographed, like True Detective-esque story. Now, if you think about the internal content of that, it's going to be very kind of tricky in order for James Gunn and co, whoever's going to write and direct the show. I'm not sure. In a later video, I'll definitely include that information. But I'm not sure. It's going to be a very tricky story and narrative to write, to include grounded noir storytelling aspects into a cosmic story. Because if you really think about the Lantern Corps are basically the intergalactic police of the DC Comics universe. They are the Texas Rangers of DC Comics. And the uniqueness of them is that using their rings, you know, whether their element is will, fear, whatever the fuck it is, you know, there's a bunch of different Lantern Corps, and I'll maybe do a later video about that. Regardless of which, if you take that into consideration, there is an exact cosmic entity that's going to be tricky to bind with a true like noir film detective story. Now, what I've heard is that they're really trying to deduce this story down to the bare bones of all the characters included, Lanterns included as well. And I think that that's an interesting concept because as far as the DCU is concerned, they definitely are in a unique position, and they definitely need to do something that's completely original as far as melding the science fiction with the more grounded realism aspects of storytelling. So, you know, and I've seen the first season of The True Detective. I've seen them all, actually. And, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey definitely had complete unique chemistry. And I'm hoping that Gunn is pulling from this as far as using it as his basis for the composition of the script as like a disgruntled character and Matthew McConaughey's more open-minded, open embracing of insanity. And I think that kind of comes along with, the story, as opposed to having these two characters, being Hal Jordan and John Stewart, walking paralyzing paths, especially considering the fact that John Stewart is going to be a rookie in the show. And, to kind of have, Hal Jordan lead the way. There's a lot of influx as to whether they're going to do the Parallax storyline, which is a whole nother complex storyline that I'll maybe talk about in another thing when I can do my second Lanterns video. But I think that, if they're going to approach creating this masterpiece as far as, establishing the Green Lantern in the first reputable light of, making the character reputable on the big screen, the Ryan Reynolds movie didn't do anything like that. Like, fuck, dude, like Parallax, like that whole was just, it was ass. It was ass. Even the CGI on the suit was ass, which is something we haven't seen yet. So let's move forward. But we'll go on to our next slide. So, Aaron Pierre, insert him. So I remember, and I work at a hospital in the greater Atlanta area, and one of my female Black coworkers mentioned to me that there's going to be this film coming out on Netflix. It's called Rubber Ridge. And it's about a Black ex-military guy who has to deal with the police issues in a rural town in the South. And, let's be real here, guys. And not, I'm not going to cut corners on this channel. I'm going to keep it 100% real. I think that there's definitely a sort of societal standard and, cultural implications behind, the premise of that particular story. And I think that Aaron Pierre's performance in that film came out of nowhere. I think he had a couple of roles. He was kind of minor. But that film, I remember the first time I watched it, I came home from work, and I was thinking about it. I remember the first shot, there's an initial establishing shot of the movie, and he's like riding a bike and the cop pulls him over and he takes his money. And I'm just looking at this man's eyes the entire time. And I'm like, oh my God, this could actually be the casting for Jon Stewart. Now, this was pre-Lanterns. I think the show had been announced. But I was looking at this guy and I was like, this could absolutely be, a contender for a casting candidate for Jon Stewart. And, it came down to him and Stephen James and a couple others. But ultimately, this guy just exudes Jon Stewart energy. Like, I mean, look at the photograph here. I'm not sure who this image is. I apologize if I'm copyright infringing, but look at the similarities here. Obviously, in this particular image, Jon Stewart doesn't have any facial hair. But, I mean, like, you guys can look at that and literally just envelop and take in your own, internal picture of this. Because I really think that there's a lot of similarities here, especially with Aaron Pierre being a British actor. And that's kind of a controversial statement because I really think that a lot of British actors kind of portray the American sort of accent and, embodiment a lot more effectively than a lot of current actors do. And I just saw this guy in Rebel Ridge and I was like, man, dude, he has the natural athletic ability. He's obviously if you could pull off an ex-military person, dude, you obviously are somewhat versed in athleticism that comes along with being along. You're somewhat encumbered with the athleticism that comes along with being a combatant. And I think that this is huge. And I think that, pulling a younger, less known, less known actor is going to be huge for this show. And I think that Aaron Pierre doesn't really have enough of an established acting persona to come along with this. So I'm so stoked to see what he does with this character. I'm 100% behind this casting. Prior to creating this channel, he was my #1 Green Lantern fan cast. So moving on to Kyle Chandler. Now, Kyle Chandler. So he has a reputable career as an actor. I've seen him in countless movies. He's played a bunch of different roles. He definitely has some sort of brooding persona. But I will have to admit that prior to hearing his announcement as a casting for Hal Jordan, I didn't see it. And as soon as it was announced, I'm looking at him and I'm like imagining a cowl on his face. And I'm like, the man can do it. Like, the man can do it. Now, I think that it's very, going without, just speaking objectively here, I think it's very interesting that Gunn decided to go with an older, more grizzled Hal Jordan. Obviously, I'm thinking that he's leading up to the Parallax story, eventually going to kill off Hal Jordan. I don't know if they're going to go with that in the first season of the show. But I think that it's, just looking at these two actors, I'll go back. Looking at these two actors, Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler, they look good together. It definitely has the embodiment of, a younger Jon Stewart learning from an older grizzled Hal Jordan. And this image here in particular is from the production of the Green Lantern Show. It's one of the first production images that that was released, excuse me. And I think that this is definitely an A1 win by casting two actors who were not necessarily preordained to be the roles that they're put in. But I think that, dude, like, I'm looking at the show and I've heard a bunch of details. I'll go into them in a later video. I don't want to, let my chips out in one basket. This looks like a Hal Jordan and a Jon Stewart. Now, the interesting aspect of the show is going to really come, if you guys can see in the background of this image, is that it's going to be set in a rural setting. So these guys are going to be undercover investigating some sort of paranormal development. Maybe it's a murder. A lot of details haven't been released yet, but it's going to be definitely a grounded story. And like I said, when we tie in the true detective element with an older grizzled Hal Jordan and a younger Jon Stewart and Aaron Pierre, Kyle Chandler being Hal Jordan, I think that this sets the grounds for a huge, interesting, creative endeavor from HBO Max. And if we're going to be real here, if you take it even a step further and you include Guy Gardner from James Gunn's new Superman, and I think that, and he's definitely going to have an appearance in the show. Like, that's no ifs, ands, or buts. Guy Gardner is going to be a reputable character in this upcoming DC Cinematic Universe. I think that, if this show has even 60% of the CGI capabilities of the original Superman film, of the upcoming Superman film, this could be a hit. especially if they tie in the darkness and, you know, the uniqueness of, you know, making this a cosmic entity, a cosmic show, a show where, you know, villains can be crazy. And I'm not even going to get into, you know, the red or yellow lanterns yet, you know, and I think that overall, the overall appeal of a Lantern Corps done properly, especially with, you know, a proper budget and a lot of other, you know, sort of attention to detail, could be huge for the DC Cinematic Universe. Because if we're going to take these things and we're going to look at them completely long term, the DC Cinematic Universe so far is absolutely going to be 3 films. Warner Brothers is not in a good profitable place as a film company. Their stock share price is ass. I've been following them on the Dow. And it's like, it's one of those things where if you want to make your investors feel more comfortable, you have to provide a narrative. You have to provide content for your users that gets engagement across the board, gets high approval across the board. So, you know, I think that the show overall has an interesting premise. I'm gonna wrap this up. And I'm so excited to see that they're actually gonna take the chance and take the, you know, see what's going on with, you know, actually making Green Lantern a reputable character as far as a cinematic perspective is concerned. So, again, my name is Lex. This is Callahan Media. If you guys like this show, again, drop a like, subscribe, comment, you know, ring the bell for more notifications. I love you guys so much. We're going to continue to do my DC content. I love you all, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.